Socrates once said, "What most counts is not to live, but to live aright." If the 20th century's dead could speak, what advice would they give us? What might they tell us about a life worth living? The dream of peace, the dream of brotherhood, it is the ultimate hope of humankind. For some people, it's not enough just to dream. For some people, the dream of peace is their mission. Let's celebrate and honor them for teaching us how we can realize the dream. Dr. Radhakrishnan, director of the Gandhi Smriti Memorial and the Gandhi Darshan Institute.
Gandhiji was called Bapu. Bapu in Indian language means father.
A leading Gandhian scholar, Dr. Radhakrishnan has worked tirelessly to spread Gandhi's message across the world.
Millions of people found in him the epitome of their aspirations.
In 1930, India was still under British rule. Salt, an integral staple of Indian diet and well-being, was monopolized by the British and taxed heavily, causing a severe hardship to the average Indian citizen. As a form of non-violent protest, Gandhi set out on foot with a handful of supporters on a 240-mile journey to the west coast of India.
Gandhi could organize whole lot of people in order to understand human dignity, justice, why they should imbibe these qualities in their life without hating.
By the end of the March to the Sea, Gandhi had thousands of supporters with him, where he demonstrated how to obtain natural salt, which was free for the taking. Gandhi once said, "My mission is not merely the brotherhood of Indian humanity. My mission is not merely the freedom of India, but through the realization of freedom of India, I hope to realize and carry on the mission of the brotherhood of man." In 1947, after decades of nonviolent struggle, Gandhi's persistence won out. The British willingly relinquished control of India to the Indians.
One man, if he is determined, if he has conquered fear of death, if he is prepared to die for a cause, if in his mind the larger interest of the community, the nation, the universe is uppermost, if he is guided by love, he will succeed.
Atlanta, Georgia, the campus of Morehouse College, alma mater of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Morehouse has a long tradition of producing leaders. Dr. King, well, he had a mentor and a role model, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who was president when he was here and indeed when I was here. And it was under Dr. Mays' leadership and tutelage that many of the ideas were formed, or at least formalized, in Martin Luther King. He was a living, visible symbol of the nonviolent application to civil rights protests. And the boycott was the first nationally visible example of that.
In December of the following year, Mrs. Rosa Parks made history by refusing to give up her seat. The Montgomery bus boycott began the following Monday under the leadership of Martin Luther King. The 24-year-old minister passionately devoted himself to encouraging Montgomery citizens, inspiring them to see a world where they were equals and showing them just how possible this was. Always quick to point out that theirs was a non-violent struggle, Dr. King envisioned a future when all of Montgomery's citizens would sit down at the table of brotherhood. The ordinary citizens of Montgomery rallied and stood their ground, carrying out the boycott for 381 days. The buses remained empty. In November of that year, the United States Supreme Court unanimously ruled that segregation on public transportation in Montgomery was unconstitutional. It was the first historic victory for the young Dr. King and the civil rights movement. As they continued to struggle for civil rights, Dr. King and his followers faced death threats, beatings, bombings, and incarceration. Throughout it all, Dr. King never compromised his message of peace, of one human family. On the campus of Morehouse College, the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel is dedicated to perpetuating the legacy of Dr. King. Since 1979, Dr. Laurence Carter has served as dean of the chapel.
Dr. King has influenced me to think a certain way in terms of love for people across all kinds of boundaries, being able to recognize the humanity in those who oppress us. He has impressed me to think seriously about the importance of nonviolence, not just as a philosophy, but as a way of life. It's all about what Gandhi called being the change you wish to see. Gandhi is a Hindu. Gandhi said it was Thoreau who led him to nonviolence. Thoreau described himself as a transcendentalist. Martin King read Henry David Thoreau at Morehouse. He was a Christian. And it is quite remarkable that they all seem to have come to the same discoveries. All had in common a kind of enlightenment, being able to see past the trappings, the cultural wardrobe that our faith traditions clothe themselves in. We have a way sometimes of wanting to keep dead men on pedestals wrapped in cellophane, high above us so that we can worship them, and sometimes dream of a time that never was. But there is one who walks among us, whose name is Daisaku Ikeda, who is the living embodiment of what both Gandhi and King stood for.
Who is Daisaku Ikeda? There's nothing more barbarous than war. With the opening line of his novel, The Human Revolution, Daisaku Ikeda documents his struggle to create a world in which violence and hate are no longer relevant options for the human race. It is the story of the Soka Gakkai, a humanistic world peace organization devoted to helping people overcome their differences and realize their potential. It is also Dr. Ikeda's story of living up to his mentor's will to create a better world. Daisaku Ikeda was a teenager in Japan at the time of the Second World War. The cruelty of war and the personal devastation to his family and his own life left a deep scar. He began reading works by Tolstoy, Thoreau, Whitman, and others. In 1947, he was invited to a meeting on life philosophy. There he met Josei Toda, second president of the Soka Gakkai, a lay Buddhist society. The meeting would change his life forever. Josei Toda, an educator, had gone to prison with his mentor Tsunasaburo Makaguchi for their ardent protest against Japan's imperial war. Inspired by his new teacher and Buddhism's philosophy of individual happiness and altruism, Dr. Ikeda determined to spend the rest of his life devoted to realizing Josei Toda's dream for world peace. As the result of his efforts, Soka Gakkai grew from a small Japanese Buddhist association to an international global force for world peace in 163 countries. He began to gather with people of other faiths and cultures who also shared this vision of a world without violence. He worked to bring the message of Gandhi, Dr. King, and others to common citizens everywhere. As a result of his efforts, he has been recognized by leading universities and peace institutes all over the world. Establishing a school system in Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia, universities in Japan and in America, cultural exchange venues, and peace institutes, Dr. Ikeda has worked tirelessly to continue the work began by Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. Dr. Alfred Ballitzer is the Dean of Political Science at Claremont McKenna College and a prominent member of the Jewish community.
His voice is a clarion call for human rights, not for one group, not for another group, but for mankind. Jews are attracted to that clarion call. My friends in the Jewish community certainly are, because we stand for the same things.
President Ikeda, I think, is one of the persons who has dedicated his life to the principles of nonviolence and peace.
He's a solid human being, a first-class globalist. I feel like Gandhi and King and Jesus are living in Dr. Ikeda.
Daisaku Ikeda took their teachings and concretized them, creating institutions through which men can live those teachings on a daily basis, taking those high and lofty teachings up in the stars and bringing them down to the earth so that human beings like you and me and ordinary human beings everywhere could live them.
And when we come to Dr. Ikeda, his greatness cannot be diminished. A powerful, imaginative assertion of individual liberty, justice, awareness of the profound interrelatedness of humanity.
Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King in some ways have been deified. They've been turned into mini gods of mankind. Daisaku Ikeda, by contrast, is a human being who labors every day in the vineyard trying to realize in the lives of people throughout the world those teachings. So he is the next generation. I think that if Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King were alive today, they would take Daisaku Ikeda by the arm and pull him up on the pedestal with him, because he is a young man. Even though 73, he is a young man, the next generation who will alert the world to these truths.
In April of 2001, the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel on the campus of Morehouse College established a prize to honor those individuals working for peace in the 21st century.
We found it most fitting to name this award the Gandhi King Ikeda Community Builders Prize. We want to introduce this parallel to the nation and say to the world, in the pursuit of truth, nation-state boundaries and faith boundaries and race boundaries don't count. We want to encourage people who are involved in peace to continue.